Okay, let's unpack this. Today we're diving into Jeanne d'Arc, Joan of Arc. An absolutely fascinating figure. I mean, she died around 19, incredibly young, but completely shifted the Hundred Years' War. Changed history, really.
Absolutely. And our mission today, is to cut through some of the myth a bit. We want to focus on what she actually did achieve, the incredible power of her conviction, and maybe what we can learn today about leadership from her story. An illiterate peasant girl saving a kingdom. It's quite something.
It really is. So let's start with her background, her growth. Born around 1412, Domrémy, France. Her father, Jacques d'Arc, he was a laborer, so not destitute.
Right, exactly. That term means a relatively, well, prosperous farmer. He owned land, employed people, so not the absolute poorest of the poor. And the sources paint her as very pious, doing normal household things like sewing, weaving.
And the whole shepherdess image.
That seems to be mostly later political spin. Savvy propaganda, maybe even from her own side, to present her as this pure, simple figure chosen from the common folk.
Right, makes sense. And then comes the turning point. Age 13, she says she hears a voice.
Yes, a revelation by a voice, as she put it in her father's garden. Later, she identified them, St. Catherine, St. Margaret, Archangel Michael, and they gave her a very clear mission. Kick the invaders out of France and get the Dauphin crowned.
The Dauphin, Charles VII, who was in a really tight spot at the time.
A huge crisis. He was disinherited by the Treaty of Troyes. The country was completely fractured. He desperately needed something, some sign of legitimacy. Divine intervention, maybe.
So, okay, she has this mission, but how does a teenage girl from the countryside actually get anyone to listen, let alone the military commanders?
Well, it wasn't easy. When the voices got more insistent around late 1428, she went to Robert de Baudricourt, the local commander at Vaucouleurs, and he basically laughed her off at first, called her an affabulatrix, a liar, a fantasist.
Ouch, but she didn't give up.
No, she persisted. And there must have been something about her, this intense conviction, her charisma. She eventually won him over. Then comes the famous part, cutting her hair, putting on men's clothes and armor for the dangerous journey to Chinon to see the Dauphin.
And she arrives at a court that's pretty desperate, I imagine, facing English propaganda that their cause was God's will.
Precisely. They needed a counter-narrative, and she provided it, which leads us to her main actions, her achievements.
First up, Orléans, May 1429, lifting the siege.
Yes. She didn't just bring supplies, she brought this incredible energy, this belief. It completely galvanized the French soldiers. The English were forced to retreat. And that victory, well, it made her famous overnight. That's when she became the Maid of Orleans.
Okay, huge military and symbolic win. What's next?
The Sacre, the coronation. This was pure political genius, arguably.
Yeah.
After securing the Loire Valley, she convinced Charles to make this incredibly risky journey, the chevauchée vers Reims.
Reims. But that was deep in enemy territory, controlled by the Burgundians.
Exactly. Highly symbolic city for coronations. Getting Charles crowned there on July 17, 1429, was a massive statement. It powerfully legitimized his claim in the eyes of France and, well, all of Europe. God's chosen king, basically.
An amazing run, but it didn't last long.
Tragically, no. Barely a year later, May 1430, captured by the Burgundians near Compiègne, and then sold to the English.
For 10,000 livres, that sounds like an enormous amount of money back then.
It was staggering. It shows you just how much of a political threat they saw her as. Not just some girl, but a real danger to their campaign. She was put on trial for heresy in Rouen and ultimately burned at the stake on May 30th, 1431.
Awful end. But during that trial, we get some insight into her mindset, right? There's that famous quote.
Yes, absolutely. On March 15th, 1431, they asked her essentially if God loved or hated the English. Her reply was quite striking. Sur l'amour ou la haine que Dieu porte aux Anglais, je n'en sais rien, mais je suis convaincu qu'ils seront boutés hors de France, excepté ceux qui mourront sur cette terre.
Which translates to?
I know nothing of God's love or hatred for the English, but I am convinced they will be thrown out of France, except those who will die on this earth. Just total unwavering conviction in her mission.
So, looking back, was she really a military leader or more of this symbolic figure? You mentioned standard bearer.
Yeah, most historians lean towards her being primarily a psychological force, a standard bearer, not a strategist in the traditional sense. Her real genius, perhaps, was in communication, in conviction. She was the perfect counter to English propaganda. How else could the English explain their sudden losses, except by claiming she was demonic? Her belief rallied her side.
It shows the incredible power belief can have, even against, established military and political structures.
Definitely. She demonstrated that leadership, that game-changing influence can emerge from the most unexpected places. It doesn't have to follow traditional paths of power.
And even though she was officially rehabilitated by the church in 1456, her story is still debated, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Her legacy, built from trial records and centuries of myth-making, is still a sort of battleground for different political and cultural interpretations today.
So the final thought for you, our listeners, what does this all mean? If this young woman, with no rank, no formal power, could fundamentally alter a war through sheer conviction.
Yeah. What does that tell us? What assumptions do we still hold about where real power and influence have to come from? And how often do we dismiss people with disruptive ideas, maybe calling them infabulatrix, when actually they might be the ones about to change everything? Something to think about.